Welcome to another installment of West of Tulsa. We are broadcasting from Ventura, California, and we have another really fun show. If you've always wanted just to drop whatever you're doing in life and just go do whatever you wanted to do, your dream is to work on classic cars or whatever, this show is for you. You're about to be a man who did just that. All right, got actually, before I introduce the guys, we don't forget to go to our
tip line
page. See? He's always keeping an eye on me.
He's doing the keywords now.
Go to westtulsa.com, click on the tip line page, fill it out. We could have you here in studio. We may just want to hear your story. You think we're talking about the wrong shit? Tell us.
Mm-hmm. We'll tell us the right shit to talk
about.
Tell us
if CJ's cussing too much.
That's it.
Or not enough.
That's right. This is where I let it loose.
Where's the cussing ratio on this show?
You keep track of that.
The cussometer.
Yeah. Dan's at the controls.
Yes, sir.
Gabe's in charge. To my right.
Yes.
He's always
Let's
in
see
charge.
what Gabe is this camera.
That's
I think.
right.
Yeah,
Big brother.
There we go.
Yep.
And our guest today, Eric Beecher. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
So Eric, let's see. You have a little bit of, as we just found out, a little bit of Indy 500 background. And we'll talk about that. He was a police officer for Santa Barbara PD for a while. And then he said, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go have fun in life, and started your own classic restoration shop.
We are going to ask him cop stories.
That's in a nutshell.
We need cop stories for sure.
Okay. So that's pretty close?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to West of Tulsa.
Wait, first, when you were a cop, did you break up any street races?
There was a time period when that was a big deal, right? The first Fast and Furious was hitting.
Yeah.
And everybody had to go to training to look at the cars and see how they were modified so that we could write tickets for it, or whatever.
Wow.
And,
you were a hated man.
That's funny.
And I was like, I'll never write a ticket for this.
There you go.
I had already made up my mind. I'm like, these poor guys.
You made a lot of friends with our viewers already.
That's funny. Oh my God. Okay. You're probably thinking that as you're in the class, like there's no way.
Yeah. There's no way I'm going to write tickets for this stuff, because I'm going to pull them over and want to look at their stuff, go, man, this is bitching.
This is sweet.
And then be like, okay, I'm going to pretend like I didn't see that.
Yeah.
See you later.
I have a friend in LAPD. He's a big car guy, and he pulls over guys just to talk to them to buy cars.
Oh, yeah.
I was just like, wow, that's awesome.
Why are you pulling me over? I want to talk fuel injectors. Come on.
Oh, that's funny. We'll talk more about the police stuff in it, but that's a great way to start off there. Yeah, you certainly earned everybody's trust around here. So how did you get into classic cars racing? It sounds like it started when you were a kid with your dad, like a lot of guys.
Yeah, our we had a big car family, and my dad, and in the '60s he raced Formula V. He was on a couple of pit crews for Indy 500 for a couple different race drivers. I think one was Bob Hickman Higman. Yeah, Bob Higman. I just got off the phone with my brother because I was asking him about, what was, I didn't know, I knew some of Dad's history, but I didn't know exactly, what it was. And so he told me about it and gave me some names and actually people, because I didn't know who the car drivers were that he was actually doing for. He talked about the crew, being on the crews for Indy 500, but anyway, so yeah, big racing thing in the 60s, and then he owned his own mechanic shop and dealership in the 70s. He had a Volvo, Mazda, Ferrari dealership.
Wow.
Volvo, Mazda, and Ferrari?
Right.
Wow. That's an interesting
Where?
mix.
In what city?
It was in Lafayette, Indiana.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Midwest.
Basically where Purdue University is.
Yeah.
So that was the early beginnings of that. And my brother, my older brother, he came up under that, and he was building cars from the time he was 14 years old. And he was a hot rod guy. He's been building hot rods his whole life. And he ended up being like an eighth in the world model builder in like 1979.
Wow.
And so, he's really good woodworker and things like that. And so, but anyway, he built hot rods. So, while I was growing up, I was watching all this happen in front of me.
Soaking it in, right?
Yeah. And so, there are pictures of me working on my pedal car when I was 5 years old, type stuff. And so, I had go-karts, I had the whole bit, so we were car people through and through. And so, so that was the beginnings, there in Indiana. And then, when I was 14 in 1985, my dad actually worked for Purdue University and got transferred out to UCSB. So that's how I ended up in California in Santa Barbara. And so came out here and grew up then, going to DP at Dos Pueblos in Goleta there, and starting to meet all these people, and then I was, like I said, I was always into cars, but it was probably when I was about 17, I started working at a body shop, Prestigious Auto Body, and I worked there for 5 years and learned how to paint cars and work on cars and did all that stuff, and so that's when I started getting into the show car stuff. I was in a car club called Low Profile. I don't know if you ever remember those guys.
Was that a mini truck?
Yes.
I do actually know that. That's funny.
But I was the only one with a VolkswagenBug in the club, right? And so they let me in, but it was, I always felt like I was the outsider, because everybody had trucks.
Yeah.
But they accepted me for the most part, and so that was my early things that I learned while I was growing up here in California. So that was an interesting experience. And but we were going to car shows, and so in the end, I ended up building a show car, my Bug, which was my first car in high school, '68 Bug, and bought it for $400. And when I bought it, it had big lips and a tongue on it and eyebrows, and took it home and took a picture of it. Day before I drove to school, I sanded it all off, but the roof was cut out of it, so it was kind of a hot mess. It was probably 10 different colors, but I didn't care. I was driving. I had a car.
You're the man in high school if you're driving.
Oh man, I had all kinds of friends all of a sudden.
Yeah, of course.
Was it owned by a girl?
No. It was owned by a guy that he had a young daughter, and the young daughter started playing around with it, I guess. And so he just kind of let her do it, whatever. Yeah. And so she put big lips on it. And,
I love my daughter. I would never let her do that to me.
Yeah. So of course, at the time, it was all I could afford was $400, and my parents probably gave me half of that money to pay for it. But yeah, so that's how I got into Volkswagens. That was my.
Now you brought a magazine. Is that the car?
Yeah. So this is the car. And what ended up happening was I kind of cleaned it up and I painted it blue and lowered it and did all the usual stuff, and then one day I was driving it and the brakes went out and I rear-ended a truck. Of course, it did nothing to the truck, but it crushed the front end of my car. And but I worked at a body shop, right? So I took it home and I told my dad, I said, well, I think this is my opportunity to just kind of rip it down and just do the whole car
the way you want it.
The way I wanted it.
Yeah.
And so of course my dad was all in. I said, yeah, let's do it. So we took it all apart and redid it, and and of course back then in the '90s, hot pink and grabber blue and the lime greens, those were the hot colors back then. So we actually made that color ourselves in the body shop, and so we called it raspberry pink. But
we'll have to take a picture and post it on the socials.
Yeah,
like that. That's it. But it's
so and that was a funny story because I got the car all done and we went cruising on State Street on a Friday night, and there's a car show down in Irvine the next day that we planned on going to, and we were going to leave in the morning, and we're cruising State Street, and it was getting late, and it was about 11:30 or so, and me and my buddy were in the car, and I'm like, hey, we got to get up early, to go to the show, so let's take off. So we're on our way home, and the engine seizes up on the freeway, and so I call my dad at midnight, and I'm like, bring the trailer, right? And so he picks me up, we take it home, and we're like, oh man, we really want to go to this show tomorrow. We had a couple girlfriends we were taking with us, we had all these plans, and we're like, so what do we do? And we're like, let's rebuild it. So we pulled the motor right there on the spot, tore it down, rebuilt it, got it all done at 6 a.m. The test drive was driving it to Irvine.
Oh, wow.
So
that's gutsy.
Yeah, and then And then that's where the car was seen at the car show. And then that's when I was approached by VW Trends.
Wow.
And so the guy gave me the car and said, hey, we want to do a feature on your car, right? I was like, oh, that's bitching, right? I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So he says, well, give me a call next week and we'll set it up. So next week I call him and I say, hey, I want to talk to this guy. His name is, I can't remember what his name was, but anyway, they go, oh, well, he got fired. He doesn't work here anymore.
Oh, man.
I'm like, dude, hey, he gave me his car and he wanted to do a feature on the car. He's like, oh, all right, well, send me some pictures and we'll see, what we can do. I was like, oh, so bummed,
Thinking you're out of it now.
It's done. Yeah. It's over. Right. So I send them the pictures and they say, hey, write up a thing and tell us all about the car and what, displacement of engine, all the stuff. Right. So I sent it down to him and I don't hear anything from him for months. Right. And I call, I say, hey, did you get my stuff? Yeah. We're talking about it, but we don't know what we're doing yet. I'm like, oh, this isn't going well. This isn't going to happen. And then a couple more months go by, and then all of a sudden I get a phone call, and the guy says, hey, we saw your pictures, we got your stuff, and we're going to do your car, and we're doing a TV show, and we want to put it on the TV show, and we're going to put it on the cover. I'm like, what?
Wow.
I'm like, all right.
Wow.
Got stepped up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So totally unexpected. And there's, this car was nice, but there were some details that I think about it now going, oh my gosh, it was a nice car, but I don't know if it was like magazine cover car, because I had friends that had cars that were much nicer than that. And they had their cars in the magazines, but not on the cover. So they were pretty pissed at me for a while. But the thing was with this car is that at the time it had the look. The look they were looking for at that time was the hot pink, the open top, all that stuff. And so it worked.
I'm looking at all the actors in here or whoever these models are.
Right.
I'm looking for you. I don't see you anywhere.
So,
are you in there?
Yeah.
So, you are? Okay.
So here's the funny thing. Because I'm thinking, okay, my car, I'm going to be on the magazine, right?
Right.
They're all, oh, no. We got models. We got a guy that's going to be cleaning the car. I'm like, well, so it's not going to be me? And they're all, no. Right? I'm like, so how do I... What do I...
How do I sneak into this?
How do I get into this? They're like, okay. We'll put you in the background. So that's me in the very back right there.
Oh, okay. All right.
That was my girlfriend at the time, and of course she turned her head right when this picture was taken.
Of course.
And then this skater was a famous skater, and I can't remember his name, Kelly something. I can't remember what it was, but at the time I didn't know anything about skating. So, but anyway, I guess this guy was a big deal in the skating world.
That's one of the things that I think that, what year is this? 90.
Yeah.
So 90s, especially in the 90s when you had this scene, because you said that, you had friends that had nicer cars in your opinion, right?
Yeah.
But it's not so much about being nicer, like you spent more money. It's about fitting a certain look or a thing that they're looking for, a theme, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's what this cover shows is the theme. Back in skating was popular and, going to the rink and all that stuff. But to me, this is lost. The scene, painting the scene. There are a lot of car guys that are all about the scene, a memory or a story or whatever. And I feel like that just gets lost for like just shock value. Like, oh, this guy spent $100,000, $200,000 on a car, or it's a rare one of one car, which is great.
Right.
But then this is like, how many? All your buddies were probably into this scene at the time. I know I had friends in that scene.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of cool to see that. That's what it was. That's what they wanted for this cover. It wasn't because this bug was better than the next car. It's just it fit a look.
Well, your car was probably chosen by an art director and not a car person.
Yeah, probably.
They were like, look at
the
that.
color.
Oh, that's the color.
But even an art director who's not a car person that's working for a car magazine, they based everything off of subscription. So they're gonna go with what people are going to buy. And they had to do some kind of cross section of a survey.
Well, how many car magazines are left, right? I mean, there's a few, but
I mean, in the 90s, especially in the 90s, there was. I mean,
there was dozens.
There's more than you can name.
Yeah.
And yes, right now they're all kind of dying. But then that whole idea, I think, is dying too. The scene, we're painting a scene. We're not, if you're building a nostalgic build for a certain time period, like a mini truck, which I think they should be making a comeback. And mini trucks are awesome. I love them.
They kind of are. I mean, which is cool.
They are in small communities, not as much as like, other communities like in hot rod scene or whatever.
Yeah.
But my point is that, the guys are going back to that, and if it hits that mark, like it's accurate for that time period, then it's not because you spent a ton of money on it. It's because you went for a specific thing that most people in that genre can relate to.
Well, I know that magazine, when I looked at it, reminded me about, I always looked at surfing magazines back in the 80s and 90s. That has that same kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Everybody hanging around posing,
Yeah.
whether it's a surfboard or whatever it is. But, yeah. Well, that's exciting. So you got the cover.
Yeah.
So, and then for a while you said you worked with ChipFoose.
Yeah. So in this time period, I was working at this body shop there, and of course, Chip and his dad Sam Foose had a shop called Project Design that was there in Goleta, which was right around the corner from where I worked. And my dad actually became friends with Sam and would go in there and see it. So I'd go in there once in a while with him, and Chip would be building something in there, something really cool, or like, oh man, the guy was so talented, and you just knew he was going places, And but anyway, when I went in there, he was building you seen the Volkswagen helmet car that DP has,
yes.
right? He built, right? And I went to high school with his sister Amy, the one that passed away. They had that disease. I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, I went to high school with her, and so anyway, we were in the shop, and he was building this helmet, right? And it was
to go on a golf cart or something.
To go on a golf cart,
yeah.
And it was for the Seattle Seahawks, and so and you would see that vehicle on TV later on. I'm going, I saw that thing being built. But anyway, so yeah, so I'll tell you a cop ChipFoose story that was kind of funny. So when Chip was working there in Goleta, he was working for a company called Asha, and they were, like I said, a prototype company that would build stuff for GM and Ford and stuff like that. Like they would say, hey, we want this special tailgate that does cool stuff. Can you design it, make it, and then we'll try it out, right? That type of stuff. So anyway, GM in 88 to 89, right? They changed their body style from the box body to the kind of rounded fender. It was a real different looking kind of truck. I don't know if you remember that or not, when they kind of changed over from that. But ultimately, so Chip designed this truck for them, and they built it, and they shipped it out to California, and then he did a custom paint job on it. He lowered it, put wheels on it, all this stuff. And so he says to me, he says, hey, do you know anybody tints windows? I said, yeah, I got a buddy of mine down in Santa Barbara that does it. He's like, can you take this truck, take it down, get the windows tinted, and bring it back? No problem, right? So I drive it down there, take it down to Mr. Tint there on Gutierrez Street, and they tint the windows, and I'm leaving, and I get pulled over for the tinted windows. Right? And I'm 17, 18 years old at the time, and the guy says to me, and of course I worked with him then later on in life, but so he says to me, he's all, he walks up, he's all, what the hell is this thing? I said, well, it's a Chevy truck. I said, but it's a prototype. It's the only one like it, right? And then he's like, okay. He's all, well, can you see your driver's license, registration, insurance? I said, well, there's no registration. I said, it's a prototype. There's no other car. It doesn't exist, right? I mean, this car really doesn't exist. Not supposed to be anyway. Right. And he's all okay. And it has Michigan plates on it. It has Michigan, not like dealer
manufacturer
plates.
Manufacturer plates.
Yeah. And so I just had no paperwork for it. I said, I don't know what to tell you. I said, I was just asked to bring it down here, get the windows tinted because it's going to a show. It's leaving tomorrow. I got to get the truck back. and he's kind of like hemming and hawing about it. Going,
Kind of feel sorry for you. Knows.
Well, he's like, technically I should tow the car. I'm like, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, hey man, just what can I tell you? Can you give me a break? I'm just trying to get the car back to the shop so it can be shipped, right?
Right.
I'm just thinking to myself, Chip's gonna kill me, right? I'm like, this thing's supposed to go to show and it's gonna get towed, and it's it's scheduled to go. I'm like, oh man, I'm in big trouble, right? And so finally he said, he gives me a break, but he writes me a ticket for the tinted windows, and no registration, and no insurance, right? And so I drive the truck back to the shop and I hand the ticket to Chip and I go, sorry man, I don't know what to tell you, but I don't know what to do with this ticket, because they were getting ready to tow the car, but luckily I convinced them not to. Don't ask me how. And so he's like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I still, to this day, had no idea what happened to that ticket. It never showed up again. I never went to court. It just disappeared. So
Wow.
I don't know what they did with it, but but I never heard about it again.
Well, you saved him. You talked him out to get that truck getting towed.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Sounds like some mafia things. Like,
Yeah.
we'll take care of it. Don't
Yeah,
worry about it.
yeah. It was like, all right,
wow.
I'll trust you, but yeah.
so that might be a good segue into how you became a police officer, since we'll go from being stopped. And so how did that all come about? Here you are working on cars, and all of a sudden,
yeah, I wanted to be a car designer. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And build cars and do cool stuff like Chip was doing, and he was my kind of my inspiration at the time. And watching him do all this stuff, so being a police officer was not on the radar at all. And so ultimately I was painting cars in my dad's garage, doing side jobs. I could paint a whole car for $700 and make money, back then.
Back then, yeah.
Now I can't even buy the products for $700.
Yeah.
But I was doing that, and that business was kind of up and down. I'd be doing good at one point, and then there'd be nothing for a while. It was, my girlfriend at the time was like, "Hey, you gotta get a real job, because this isn't going to cut it in the long run." And I thought, well, maybe I'll start my own car business or something like that, but I was 21 or at the time, at this point, and I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere here. I got to do something now. I got something with benefits. I got to have something I could, So I ended up getting a security job, and worked my way up through the company, and worked at Delco Electronics there in Goleta, and ultimately became the person in charge of security there over the years. And then one day I was working at Delco Electronics, and the guy from the airport came over because they have to inspect our property because it's right in front of the runway. And he says, "Hey, why don't you come work for me, over at the airport patrol?" Right? I'm like, oh, good benefits, got some retirement, money was better. I'm still thinking about cars. I'm still working on cars and doing stuff for myself, but not really doing anything else, So ultimately, I ended up going to the airport, working airport patrol for a couple of years, worked for the city, and then decided that I was going to go and want to be a cop. I mean, because I kind of got it in the blood. Once I started doing it, it was fun and exciting and all that stuff, and so that's what I ended up doing. I became a reserve police officer first, and with Santa Barbara, and then went to the academy in 2000, and that was the longest 6 months of my life. I still sweat when I go by the academy, and then I just started working there at the PD, and so, but I was still doing car stuff. I mean, I'd always been working on cars and kind of doing my own thing, but time went by, and later on in my career, I was kind of just figure out, I'm starting to creep up to 50 and trying to decide, hey, you know what, I still really like doing the car stuff, and I think I want to.
That's where your passion is, right?
Yeah, and I missed it. I missed it, going to the car shows and doing car stuff, and so I was watching the car show. I was watching Chip on Overhauling. I was watching Bitch and Rides. I was watching all these shows. I'm like, man, I want to do that. I like that stuff. I like working with my hands. I like making stuff, and I still was messing around with paint and stuff, but I wasn't doing full paint jobs or anything, but I'd do stuff here and there for people, and a little side work here and there, just putzing around just for fun. And then probably about maybe 7 years or so before I retired, I decided I'm going to start doing this car thing on the side, or I rented a little shop in Goleta, and it was a little 2-car garage thing. And I was only working on my car, really. It was just kind of me have a place to work on my car because my neighbors are getting mad at me working on cars, in my neighborhood. I'm painting, and they come over and scream at me, I can smell the chemicals, yeah, okay. So wife was like, you gotta move this somewhere else, So I rented a shop, and that's kind of where it started. Where I had this shop, and all of a sudden people were asking or walking up and going, "Hey, what are you doing there? You're working on cars. You do work on cars.
Could you do this for me?
Yeah, can you do that for me? I'm like, yeah, I guess I could. It would help pay the rent, Yeah. And so that's kind of how it morphed, and the shop kept getting bigger, and I kept moving around, and I needed more room. I got more projects going, and then
start hiring people.
Yeah, and then the guys at the PD, that were retiring, and they had some money from their retirement, and they wanted a retirement gift to themselves. They're like, hey, can you build me a car? I'm like, yeah, I guess I could, and so that's kind of how, a couple guys at work, saw that I could do this stuff, and I agreed and said, yeah, okay, I'll build you a car, so I started, one of the first ones I did for one of the guys at work was a 65 Mustang, and it was a full body off, well, Mustangs are unibody, but, we took the car completely apart. In fact, the car had been rolled, had been hit a tree, and I actually told him, hey, don't use this car, go buy another car and we'll fix that instead. But he's like, no, this is my wife's dad's car.
Sentimental.
She wants this car. I'm like, all right, it's just going to cost you more, but so we cut the roof off, put a new roof on it, almost replaced every panel except for the trunk and one quarter panel in the back. The rest of the car was completely changed out, and luckily, and it wasn't even rust issues. It was just
banged up.
Yeah, it'd been too much. Too many problems.
Hit too many trees.
What kind of cars are you into? Like, what's your passion? What do you own?
I'm a hot rod guy at heart. I one thing that I haven't bought yet that I'm still want to do at some point, I probably will, is I wanted a 32 coupe.
Okay.
That's kind of my jam.
Okay.
But
would that become a drag car or a street car?
Street car.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't race, or you don't aspire to be on the racetrack.
I don't want to say I want a trailer queen, but I want something that I can drive, but yet still look good. I can take it to shows and show it, but it's not
like a resto mod type thing, not something purist, original, or anything like that.
Yeah,
okay.
So I still have a '65 Volkswagen Bug that I bought when I was 19. I still have it, and I chopped it, I lowered it, bagged it, suicide doored, the whole bit. And still haven't finished it, so it's kind of like the.
I feel so much better about my builds now.
Yeah, he's always talking about his builds.
Yeah, it's kind of like the shoemaker's kids don't have shoes.
Yeah.
I'm always working on somebody else's stuff, and I just don't get my own stuff done.
Yeah,
and so which is a drag because I really miss going to the shows and do it. But what I'm doing now is the cars that I've been building for people is I take those cars to shows and show them and
that's got to be gratifying though when you build a nice car for a customer and you get to bring it to the show and have people ask you about it and how'd you do this? Why'd you do this? That's got to be fun, right?
Yeah, it is. Well, that's kind of what keeps me going, right? Because and I've had just about every car that I've built from scratch that I wouldn't say is a total full restoration. They've all won first places in shows.
Wow.
So.
That's awesome.
So that's nice.
Yeah.
That's like kind of your badge of honor, maybe, because your job is about craftsmanship, right? These shows, people get rated on craftsmanship. So that is a direct result of your work, which is your business versus like building race engines, right? Yeah.
And I'm not tied to one car necessarily. I built Mustangs, Corvettes, Chevelles, a buddy of mine has a Monarch Lucerne, which is it's a 56 Monarch Lucerne, which is the it's a Canadian car, but it's the American version of that would be a Mercury Montclair. And you know, and he was a guy that worked with me at the PD and retired from there. And his dad bought that car brand new in '56, drove it from Canada to Santa Barbara, and he's got all the paperwork on it. You know, the receipts from the dealership, all the paperwork on it.
The gold.
Yeah.
The
And
gold
so
on those cars.
I spent 2 years rebuilding that car from the ground up, and he goes to a lot of shows with it, and he gets a lot of awards because it's not only rare, but he's got a story behind it, which is really, I think, important at these car shows, that people have a story behind it. You know, you can go out and buy a Kindig car for $500,000 or $1 million, you know, but you know, it's built by somebody else, and there's no story behind it other than.
And we agree. I mean, that's why we're doing this, because we think the stories add so much to it.
So it's really important.
Do you primarily focus on building ground up restorations and hot rods, or what's the main focus of the business?
You know, most of it was restorations, full restorations. And I'm starting to kind of get away from that only because you spend way more time than you get paid for on it. And
This has been a hot topic of debate on our especially on our socials, because we had Dana Newquist and he was talking about how the restoration trades have been dying.
Yeah.
You know, and people are doing it less. We're doing more, like especially body shops are doing more insurance work because it's, you know, the turnover is a lot better.
Right.
You know, so what you're saying kind of jives with what he was saying.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about too is that if you're going to restore a vehicle, I mean, truly restore a vehicle, there's a lot of historical research on what is proper, what is not proper.
Yeah.
Everything from materials, everything about the car.
Yeah, I spend countless hours researching parts, ordering parts, looking for stuff, whatever it is. I don't charge for any of that.
It's hard to bill for that, right?
Yeah.
You know, what customer wants to pay for research, you know?
Right.
Yeah, but you got to do it, though, to get the right product for your customer, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Plus, if you get away from restorations, you do a little more customization work. Creativity comes into it. You have a little more fun.
Yeah. I've really gotten into, from watching all these shows on TV, I've really gotten into the metal fabrication. And so I bought all the tools, the brakes and the wheels and all the stuff to shape stuff and cut stuff and bend stuff, and I've really it's really fun for me, you know, and therapeutic, if you want to call it.
Yeah,
do you do all the facets? I mean, do you do upholstery, electrical, or do you like have a network of subcontractors that you trust that you bring? You know, I need upholstery on this. Or
Little of both. Yeah, I can do everything but sew.
Okay.
So I make my own door panels from scratch.
Wow.
You know, do all that stuff, and so, but I've had to learn that myself.
Yeah.
But I also learned it from watching it on TV and internet and wherever else, and just doing it.
What about electricals? Like, do you do wiring harnesses and stuff like that?
I don't like to. I've forced myself to kind of do some of it. Usually, I'll try to get somebody else to come in and do it.
Okay.
If I can find somebody, which is not easy to find, especially around Santa Barbara area.
Yeah.
Which goes to Gabe's point, what he just said. Yeah, it's what we're hearing from everybody is getting harder and harder.
Well, everybody now, especially in the car world, they want to be doing laptop work. You know, tuning is a big thing too, because you can do it remotely now, and people just like, I don't mind being on a laptop all day long because they don't get dirty, but they're still involved with cars. Whereas they need somebody to wire up a loom, to run the electrical, to do the actual physical labor on the car, which is far and few between these days. You know, I still think it's cool. To me, it's really, when I see a wiring harness that's done really well, even like on a 65 Mustang, even if you got a wiring harness kit or whatever, but you still made it look nice and tidy, and like a Gasso does, you know.
And that's time consuming.
Yes,
I mean it takes hours to get that stuff the way you want it, and
no one ever sees it when it's tucked away. Right?
They don't. You can't really appreciate it. You know, people don't probably understand or can appreciate unless you're in the world of working on cars and doing that stuff. How long it really takes to do that kind of stuff. And people, you know, they watch these shows and they see a car that gets rebuilt in an hour.
It's very glossed over on TV.
Yeah. It's like, that's a 2-year build.
And I mean, let's face it. I mean, I don't mean to like stir the pot, but a lot of those cars, I've seen them at SEMA and you can tell they cut a lot of corners, you know, to get a car. I mean,
to get it done in time.
Yeah,
right?
and I get it. It's like, but most people think that you're getting this beautiful show-stopping car in a week for 10 grand or whatever. And like that's not the case. That's not the reality of it. They don't know. A lot of people that watch this stuff on TV, they don't know about paint jail.
Right.
They don't know about that stuff. Like it takes a year to paint a car. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, good paint job.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the reality, the difference between reality and what they see on the internet is far, removed.
Well, like Bruce, have you met Bruce
Terry?
Yeah. Do you know Bruce Terry?
No.
He's Dana's guy who's working on Platypus.
Oh, okay.
And he's got an English wheel that he built.
Yeah.
From scratch.
Yeah.
And watching someone on an English wheel who really knows what they're doing. I mean, that's like medieval. It's like
he even said it's therapeutic because
It's
you have a rhythm that you do in a cadence or whatever.
Yeah.
But also you're building something literally with your hands,
Yeah.
right? And I can see the gratification, but like everything else of quality, it takes time, it takes effort and money, and very few people are willing to pay for that kind of thing because we live in a world of instant gratification now.
Right.
Or
bolt-on parts.
I mean, when you can order parts, and I've done it plenty of times on Amazon, and they actually work, you're like, okay, this is kind of cool, but then you start getting spoiled and you start expecting this kind of stuff. But when it comes to paint and customizing and fabrication, it's just you're not going to get that. You have to have some physical labor, do it. Spend the time and the money to do it right.
And I'm curious, speaking of that and all these talents that are slowly disappearing with the younger crowd, what do you think right now is the hardest one to find? When you're building something, what's the hardest? I mean, is it a body guy? Is it a paint guy? Is it an upholstery guy? What is it?
I think it's upholstery.
Is it? Yeah.
Upholstery is the hard one, huh?
I think so. Well, it is up in our area.
Really?
Anyway.
It isn't here too.
And the guys that are really good at it, they're getting to the point where they're getting older and they're kind of getting over it and they're wanting to get out of it.
And their kids don't want to
kids
get
don't
into
want
it.
to be an
and nobody's
upholsterer.
taking their place. And it's like, come on, and they're making a lot of money. I mean, the upholstery guys, if you take something to them, I mean, you'll spend easily $5,000 on an upholstery job, and it's crazy how much stuff costs, and I look back, I think back when I was building cars when I was younger, and I would cringe when I had to pay somebody $25 an hour to do body work on my car. I was like, I can't really afford that. How many hours are you going to take to do this? Because I don't know if I can afford it. And you spend $600 having a whole car redone. Body work wise, that would now cost $6,000. To just do body work. And so and that's hard too, because when people ask me, well, how much does it cost to do this or do that? I'm trying to think in my head, oh man, materials and time, and I was only charging like $75, $85 an hour. And a lot of places are charging $140 an hour
or more,
and so they cringe at that, and I go, I don't think you understand. How much things really cost. How much time it really takes.
I was with Steve Feist yesterday, and he was working on a 61 Corvette for a buddy of his, and he had bought a carpet kit. He wanted to replace the carpet kit, and then I was like, so let me guess, this carpet kit doesn't just pop right in. He's like, no, dude, I've been flexing with this thing for like, a couple hours here. And then he's like, hey, I need you to help me align this door. I mean, I was just helping him do one door. And I was there for an hour. I had to go, but he was like, yeah, I'll be here for another couple hours adjusting this freaking door.
Trying to get the gaps.
Yeah, and he's not charging for that. It's like who's going to,
Right.
but it's like, this door has to shut perfectly when it leaves my shop. And I was like, I get it, but how do you pay for that? How do you charge for that? And, and does the customer really, they expect the door to shut properly, but they don't know what it takes to do that. No. And you can explain it to them, but they don't care.
No.
Right. Nope. So that's a tough one.
And I understand their side of it too. I would expect that too. If I took something to a shop and I wanted something done, I expect it to be done right.
Yeah.
And I don't care how you do it, just make sure it's right.
Yeah.
But the question is, how much are you going to pay for that?
Yeah.
And you're right.
Because you're running a business too at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. And so, so luckily I don't have a lot of overhead now, because all the shops that I've had and Galita and all that stuff at different places, I got to the point when I retired and decided I'm going to work on cars now, that I needed to find a way to cut down my costs. And so that's when my wife and I decided, well, I think we're going to either move to Arizona or do something else. Luckily, we didn't move to Arizona. We found a place up in Ynez already had a shop on it. And so I was able to kind of modify the shop and get it to where I wanted it. I had a hay barn in the back, and I, converted it into a paint booth.
Oh, sweet.
There you go.
So hopefully the EPA is not watching.
Do you? They're not, by the way.
Nobody watches. Nobody
watches our show. It's perfect. No. So, do you? Is it just you at your shop?
Yeah, I have a part-time guy that comes in half days during a few days during the week, and known him since in high school, and so he's an old hot rod guy too, and so he just likes coming up and farting around doing this stuff, and he's kind of my wiring guy because he was actually a journeyman of electrician, so at least he knows stuff about positive, negative,
not to get electrocuted.
Yeah, exactly. So I let him do the wiring stuff.
So do you prefer it that way? Because you really did this out of a passion for cars, and since you're physically working on the cars yourself, do you prefer it this way versus having a whole staff of people, or is that something we want to get to? Or
I've thought about that a lot over the last few years, because I could have easily expanded my business. And because I had people coming in all the time wanting stuff done, and I would turn a lot of stuff away because I just didn't have the manpower to do it. But then I couldn't find manpower to do it either, So I got to the point where I was like, okay, I might hire another guy and do some stuff, and maybe I can turn stuff over a little faster. And as stuff comes in, I might be more likely to take it on. But then I try to hire somebody, and they work for a couple weeks, and all of a sudden they don't show up, or they've got some other issues going on and things at home, whatever it is, right? All of a sudden there's drama. I'm like, oh man, do I really want to deal with this all the time? I'm going to spend more time dealing with that than I am working on cars, and so I thought to myself, do I want to be the next Kindig, or do I just want to do my own thing and stick with that and be happy with that? And at this point in my life, I think I'm happy with just kind of doing my own thing and keeping it low stress.
Yeah, low stress is nice.
And I would imagine you're pretty busy, right? I mean,
I don't advertise. I don't advertise, and I still got people asking for stuff, and it's all word of mouth, and it usually comes from the car shows, for the most part. But I'll go to Cars and Coffee. Somebody will ask me, oh, did you do, they see a car and they go, did you do this? And I say, yeah. And did you paint it? I did everything, and they're like, oh man, give me your card, I'm just like, okay, I might do something for you, but if it's too big of a job, I may not, because I'm in a place, luckily, where I can pick and choose what I want.
Yeah, sure. That's great.
And if I see something that I think would be fun to build and do, then I'll probably do it.
So you got to have some kind of interest in the customers you take in. Like, it has to be something, it doesn't want to be the same thing you've done 10 times, or something a little different.
Yeah, something different. But if you know something really well because you've done it a bunch of times and it's kind of easy, then but it also comes down to, are they going to give you the leash, I guess, to do whatever you want with it. That's kind of where I'm at. Do you go, okay, I think I know what you want, but and I'll usually do a rendering for them. I'll draw it out. I'll do put the paint job on the paper so they can kind of get it visual. If they can't visualize what they want, they just tell me, I kind of like this, I kind of like that, I want that. Okay, you're giving me free reign to do whatever I want, or do you need to see something so you can make a decision?
Sure.
Yeah.
And so again,
and everybody's different.
I don't charge for the drawing.
Yeah.
I'll draw it out. I'll spend hours, doing a drawing, show it to them, and they go, yeah, that's what I want. Okay, great. Or they'll change it up however they want.
We had a guest on the show, August Perro from Agasso Outdoor, and he said something interesting. When he deals with clients, he does like an interrogation of them, right, to find out what they want, because he has a certain style of his builds, but they do have some flexibility based on the customer's needs, but to a point. Like he said, I won't paint a pink one. At least at the time he said he wouldn't paint a pink Bronco or whatever.
There's nobody's paid him enough to paint it.
Yeah, but he has his own signature touches, whether that be like quality. I mean, craftsmanship's always something, but he has his own touch. It's like you could tell like that was an Agasso built car or whatever. Is the same thing with you? Was like, a customer comes to you and is like, hey, I got this, 56 Bel Air. I want to do this. But then you're like, I want to put your own signature touches, or will you do whatever the customer says? I mean, where do you strike that balance?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of communication, right? And trying to, I tend to have I would say a ChipFoose vibe about my paint jobs. Like if you looked at a couple of my paint jobs, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's very ChipFoose looking.
Got it.
I think because that's where I learned, right? That's what I learned to do when it comes to two-tone graphics, whatever it is, fading, whatever it is I do on the car. That's kind of how I grew up. That's how I learned, and that's kind of what I know the best, and I try to I try to mix it up and try to change things a little bit so they don't all look the same, right?
Yeah.
But if you looked at my paint jobs and you'd be like, oh, this looks like something Chip would do, it's kind of probably the same.
It's a good thing you didn't grow up with Earl Scheib.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's so funny.
No, that's cool. So what would you say is your favorite part about the business?
Well, I think the gratification of a finished product and when they see the car for the first time after it's been done, and they go, oh man, this is like better than I expected. Yeah.
That's pretty
eyes
cool.
get big and like, big smile.
Especially when during the build, I would suggest things, because they think, oh, I think I want it this color and I want to do this interior, and in my mind, I'm looking at it and going, oh man, that's not going to look good. Yeah, those things aren't going to fit together very well. Let me try to talk you into something else real quick. Let me show you something else, see if you like it, And so then you say, hey, let's look at this color. Let's look at this interior. And these, I think will go together really nicely. And, and they say, oh, okay, I'm going to trust you, And then in the end, when the car is done, they're like, oh man, I didn't even think it would look like this. They had no idea. And
now, are they following it through the process, or do some people just like to be kind of hands off and surprise me a little bit?
I tend to send pictures as things are progressing, because I usually have questions, things that they don't like in their car. Do you want Bluetooth in your car? Do you want electric windows? Do you want what are all these things? Of course, all these things are going to cost extra to do. Yeah. I don't need to upsell things, but sometimes I think I get into something. I go, oh man, this thing would be really cool with this cool console in it that I can make. I'll make this console, and it'll flow from the front all the way through the back. And do all the stuff. And so then I tell them, hey, I think a console in here would look really cool. Let's get rid of the bench seat. Let's put buckets in it. Let's do this and do that. But I like I said, I have to draw it up for them sometimes so they can visualize it, because sometimes they can't see it, And so I'm very much in my mind when I see a car, no matter what it is, I can see a car that's for sale on the side of the road, and it's like an old 64 GTO. And I look at it and I go, oh man, I do this to it, I do that to it, all these things, for all these modifications, totally cool looking. I'm thinking, I might buy that car and do it. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get to it, but I want to.
Well, I'm going to ask a question. I'm sure Dan has thought about this, because he's asked some of our previous guests this question, and I know it's a question you probably cringe at, but I'm going to ask it because I know. But it's a legit question, because it's a question that I know all of our viewers are going to ask.
I know what you're going to ask.
Okay. It's the which I'm sure you get all the time. How much does a paint job like this cost? Right. Yeah. That's like, I know it's a trick question for sure, but costs have gone up.
Give us a range, maybe. That's
well, that's usually what people say. Give me a range. But like someone comes in with old hot rod, and I want to repaint the whole thing. Let's just talk about paint job, because fabrication, restoration, chassis, all that stuff, it's a whole different ball game. But some guy wants to take their car and bring it in for a paint job, because as tough as that is the first question that every single person I talk to asks on a paint job. How much do these things cost? And what is the typical time it takes for you personally to do the job?
So I kind of like doing this. I call it the face test. I'll throw a number and so they'll ask me that same question, right? Well, how much do you think it's going to cost? I said, my paint jobs start at $8,000, and they go, oh.
That's the face,
really?
huh?
Yeah,
that's the face.
Like, really? Oh, what? Well, the car is, the car's not worth $5,000. I know. I don't know what to tell you. But that's and
But your paint jobs, you're doing a show quality paint job. You're not doing I want it to look okay at Cars and Coffee. You're doing stuff where they could take it to a show and win, right? It's that level of work is what you like to do, right?
That's what I like to do. Now, I know there's cars that you want to say they're regular drivers, and they're just like, hey, I want a nice paint job. Doesn't have to be show paint job. Oh, okay. We can do that, but I still like it to be a certain level of
Quality.
right.
Yeah.
Well, detail, right?
Detail, yeah. It's got to. I want it to be done right, for one, and two, I don't want it something to look at. People go look at, and go, oh, that's kind of a crappy paint job.
Yeah.
Who did it?
Yeah. I don't want people to say that. I don't want people to go, oh man, that's a nice paint job. Who did that?
Well, is it true that not the majority, but a large portion of that, say 8,000, or I'm going to give you 10 grand to paint my 57 Chevy, right? Is a large portion of that, it's prep and disassembly and reassembly, right? Like it's not the actual painting, it's the prep for the painting, just like a house, right?
Any paint job, 90% of a paint job is a prep.
Yeah.
I mean, because
it's firewall, door sills, engine interior,
but
all that
also
stuff, right?
like making sure everything's not dented anymore. Sanding. I mean, I had to do some of it on my own car, and I don't want to do it. That's why I have no problem paying somebody because I know it's tough work. But you got to do that because it's going to show when you shoot it. If you don't do the proper prep work, it's going to show.
If you don't do it right,
job.
you shoot it and it comes off.
And everybody thinks it's how you sprayed the car, and that's not the case at all.
No.
You know?
Yeah, just about anybody could probably spray paint a car, right?
Yeah.
And that's you can learn to spray the paint, not a big deal. I mean, there is some learning curve to that, but it's not that hard to do, right? But getting a car straight, fit and finish, because I mean, you get a panel out of place, and you're going to see that all day. They're not even going to look at the paint. They're going to look at that panel and go, man, this car is.
That's wonky.
It's got a half-inch gap here between the fender and the door.
And it drives me crazy when I look at that and go, oh, why didn't they fix that?
Well, this is going to sound naive and stupid, which I am. I'm not a car guy. Not a car guy.
Sure, you're not, Dan.
But I've been watching Hoovie, and he goes that one guy who's got the shop in Wichita or whatever, and same thing. He'll bring him a Bentley. He got a Bentley. That same thing. Body panels were out, kind of whacked, and his hoopties, right? And the guy. That's what I'm seeing. Like the paint looks nice, but it's like the chrome and the headlight surrounds and the seams and the rocker panels were like this one hit a stump or whatever, and it's like he replaces all that stuff, and that's what's cha-ching.
Oh yeah,
it's
that's
like,
the expensive part for sure.
Yeah, and of course he's crazy because he's doing Bentleys and all kinds of crazy cars and stuff. So is it true? Like I know you do mostly hot rods, but is it true that exotics and foreign cars and stuff like? To do this kind of work, it ratchets it way up from just doing a hot rod, or
yeah. Well, I think in an exotic car, the expectation is that it's going to be perfect, right? I mean, you want it to look like it did when it came out of the factory, or better,
like a machine painted it, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a Jaguar or a Bentley or a Ferrari or something like that,
and I've done all those kind of cars in the past, and sometimes I'm my own worst critic. I will get a car done and look at it and go, oh man, I really don't.
OCD.
Yeah, I don't like this. I need to change it or I need to fix it. So am I going to spend another 100 hours fixing this?
100 hours, huh?
Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to ask him about too was the lowrider thing. This came up on another show we did. Some of these lowriders have $100,000, $150,000, or $200,000 paint jobs, right?
Yeah.
Have you done anything like that? That's like just over the top.
No, I mean the paint jobs that I've done are have taken a long time to do. I probably haven't done a paint job that costs more than $15,000.
Okay. So there's levels of this.
Yeah. For the lowrider thing is that it's a different type of beast because it's not just
artwork and metal flake and all that stuff.
But
right?
yes, but it's the artwork. It's the airbrushing
It's the
that
artwork.
takes so long. It's so detailed. That's why it's like it's a mural. It's not just a paint job.
I gotcha.
It's a totally different beast than
it's an East LA mural put on a car.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different.
Gotcha.
The amount of masking time and prepping time and planning for what you're going to do and all that. I mean, it's just hours and hours and hours of work. It's crazy. And I mean, I got to give it to the guys that paint those lowriders. I mean, the paint jobs are just insane, that they do.
Sure.
And sometimes I like to go, how did they do that?
Yeah.
Right.
And I've been painting cars for, 40 plus years. And I go, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
Well, especially when you see like, oh, they got a Tupac and they've got a they've got a Cesar Chavez on it, and it's and it looks real. It's like photographic.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, that's some.
You guys saw the one I took the photo of when I was in Hemet, seeing my dad a while ago.
Yeah.
The whole back of the car was a whole scene.
Yeah.
And I walked up to the guy who owns it, and I said, "So tell me about this." I mean, it blew my mind.
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh, this is about how we grew up and and
Yeah, a lot of heritage.
and the whole story. It's like the whole
Yeah.
family story was there on the back trunk.
Yeah.
It was like, wow.
Well, the
Impressive.
thing that always that really caught my eye when it was a big deal, years back when the real looking flames started coming out.
Yeah.
Michael Lavallee started that.
Yeah. I'm going, man, that is badass. How
Yeah.
do they do that? And just watching them do it, and it's just, and it's just it's the detail.
It's like little airbrush stuff, right?
It's like a photograph.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow.
They got shadows and they got
it's crazy.
volume and they've got.
Mike Lavallee started that trend way back when, but before flame jobs were, you mask it, and don't get me wrong, the flat flame jobs are cool with the gradients and stuff like that. But this guy took it to a whole nother level where it's like the flame.
It looks 3D,
It's
right?
photorealistic almost. It's a very unique style, but that style kind of went away a little bit. Maybe it come back again, like everything else kind of trends.
It's a trend.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a lot of ghost flames in my time, and ghost flames come and go, people, and for a while there, graphics on a car were a big deal, right? And then that trend kind of went away, and then flames were a big deal, and then ghost flames, and then
wraps are huge,
and then two tones, and all these different things happen, and my friends, laugh at me and joke with me about everything I do is two tone, like my shop is a white wall with gray on the bottom with a stripe all the way around, and they're like, are you going to put a stripe on it? Yeah, probably.
Now, do you do pinstriping?
Or
do you have a pinstripe guy?
I do have. I have the stuff to do pinstriping.
Yeah.
But I tend to put the pinstripe in the paint job. So I will typically, like doing a two-tone paint job, or if I'm doing flames or whatever I'm doing, I will paint the color on. I'll put the fine line tape on there. And then I'll paint it and then pull so the fine line is my pinstripe.
Oh, gotcha.
And then it's all underneath. So when you feel a paint job, it's flat.
It's in the paint.
It's in the paint.
It's under the clear coat or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen a few of those guys like do the hand pinstriping, and that's an art unto itself too. You see their brushes and they're just like doing this.
Yeah.
It's like, dang, how do you?
There was a guy
do that
back in the day in Santa Barbara. His name was Butch, and he was kind of a baker dude, and he would come to the shop, and he looked like Hell's Angels guy, but totally the nicest guy, right?
Yeah.
And he comes up and he was the pinstriper guy, right? And he would come up there and his hand would be doing this, shaking.
What?
I'm like, how do you
really?
And he gets up there with the brush and he puts it on the car. He's like, and it's like the smoothest thing I've ever seen.
Maybe he gets it all out of the way first, and then when he hits it, because
you'd think he had Parkinson's or something, but but he got up there and he just bam, and he nailed it every time. I'm like, it was perfect. I'm like,
it's amazing.
Man, it's an art, right?
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah, we should get some pinstrippers on the show.
We should.
I just met a
was
guy
thinking
from
the same
Australia that came down to pinstripe one of Steve Feist's trucks. Man,
it's an art. It's really an art.
It's an art, but it's a different. I mean, just getting to watch somebody do it on a car.
I know. And if you screw up, it's like, what do you do?
I was
you
wondering
wipe
how
it off and you do it again.
Actually, that's what they do. They do.
You just wipe it off before it dries and do it again.
But when they're doing the really intricate ones, I always amazed they don't like drag their hand through what they just did. I mean, they just know exactly where everything is. I mean, it's crazy. It is fun to watch.
Yeah, they do
mesmerizing.
This. They do this. It's like their forefinger.
Well, actually, they'll use their bottom fingers as a guide along the actual. The metal or whatever. Yeah, everybody's got their own technique.
I saw one on Instagram probably just in the last couple of days where the guy had this almost like an arm. Have you seen that? Where an arm kind of sticks in another part of the car. It's probably 2 feet long.
Like suction or something?
It kind of just, it's his guide. It's his weight. It has a little rubber at the end of it. It just allows him to be steady.
I feel like that's
then-
cheating for pinstripers.
Yeah, and-
it's like that's not OG.
But it still takes.
Yeah.
But basically, you still have to do the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's almost like using your pinky. It's
Yeah.
like pinky
Yeah,
is
yeah,
another
yeah.
way of
Yeah.
but
Pinky
it's
extension.
I
mesmerizing.
mean, what the hell do
to
I
sit
know?
there
I
and
don't.
watch
I don't know how to do that crap. So
We don't know shit here.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
No, we don't. But we can appreciate shit.
But we just get the experts on and then grill them, and we learn a little bit,
Absolutely.
right? We learn a little tiny.
Yeah, we
bit.
learn about shit a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely. I would say you're probably on the more cost effective. I haven't heard anybody that will give you a number without going, oh, I gotta think about it. I'll let you know. Gotta see the car.
Yeah,
I hate that. I gotta see the car.
8 to 15 for a custom hot rod resto paint job to me sounds reasonable. I mean, that
think I'm
doesn't
gonna-
sound outrageous at all.
Makes me want to bring my wagon to you.
Yeah, it's to me that seems normal. You know,
yeah, that's. I mean, you're
but
not charging Santa Barbara
yeah.
prices, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just me growing up in the car business and doing all this stuff all the time. Yeah, I hated it when I felt like I was overpaying for something to be done.
Yeah.
You know, and I get it. You know, people come in and they want something done and they find out how much it costs and like, they're dragging their feet. You know, I'm like, hey, I get it.
Well, what does Chip charge for a paint job, right? You know,
Well,
Anyone,
he's probably $300 an hour.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, if you could even get,
if you could even
to
get
that,
time
yeah.
with them,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking, well, I don't think you want to give out your company name and put your name up because you're going to get flooded with phone calls
Yeah.
from people.
Well, the
They
funny
hear
thing
this.
was like before I came in, I was like, all right, do I shut my webpage down? What do I have to, or do I turn it on? You know, I don't know what I want.
our audience isn't that big,
yeah,
so.
yeah.
Well,
So-
now it will be now because people are looking for paint jobs.
Well, there you go. There
I
you
mean,
go.
we're gonna get around this. Yeah, he'll do a paint job for 15 grand, 10, 15 grand. I guarantee your phone's gonna.
Yeah,
light up.
yeah. I'm
Well, that's
sure.
good.
But then they're also going to say, I've got this rust bucket. I have a door left over that I want you to use on the rest of the car. You know, and I don't want you to use a donor car. You know,
Oh, that brings up an interesting topic: clear over rust.
Yeah, so I'm doing that as we speak. I'm doing a patina paint job on a 66 21 window VW bus. And so, you know, I was trying to get him to actually redo the whole thing and you know, because those are worth some money, you know.
Yeah.
But he's an old school guy and he likes it the way he likes it. But so what do? He had me put suicide doors on it, you know, which the VW guys are like, what? You did suicide doors on a 21 window bus? Are you crazy?
Sacrilege. Sacrilege.
It is, right?
Yeah.
I was like, don't tell anybody I did it. But I did. And so, but we made it look like all original. So the door handles are still on there. The hinges are still on there. You can't tell that they're suicide until you try to open the door. And,
Now, Gabe is our resident, you know, butcher, basically. So what's your thought? Because we always ask Gabe, like, what do you think about that? 21 window.
well, it's his
VW.
car. He can do whatever he wants.
Well, right,
number one,
but,
right?
But would you do it? Is the question.
I personally would do it. I mean, there's plenty of things that I would do that would probably piss off a whole different group of people. Suicide doors is not my cup of tea, but I also can appreciate them.
Yeah.
Because if you're going for a certain look, and obviously just with anything else with cars, it's all about the execution.
Yeah.
It's all about the execution.
Yeah.
Like you could do something stupid with your car, which I think is stupid. Like, you know, like having a car with, you know, cambered out wheels. That's totally not safe.
Right.
I know that's a thing. And you see people breaking all the time, which rightfully so, you deserve it to do that.
Yeah.
But if you want to do that and you want to do it proper and safely and you know, it's your thing, it's your car, it's your form of expression. You can do whatever you want with the car. It's like when I buy a car and I start chopping it up and the previous owner finds out, they're like, dude, why did you do that? It's like, well, then you shouldn't have sold it to me if you didn't want me to chop up this car. You know, it's like, it's my car. I can do whatever I want with it. So I'll say this. I could say that's not my thing, but my opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's his car. He can do what he wants. If he did it for somebody else or for the likes or get clout online,
Well,
that's
I
stupid.
just think because it's veering into the collector. Like we had a discussion about a Porsche because you found a Porsche at Seven Stock at 7 Day that had a rotary in it, right?
yeah, and look, that's his choice. You know, I'm not into
And you said you probably wouldn't do that unless it was like a donor rust bucket.
No,
piece of
I
crap.
wount do it in a Porsche because I like the Porsche engine.
Yeah, you like
as much
the Porsche
as I love,
engine.
I'm
That's
a rotary
true.
guy.
You
I'm
did
also
say that.
yeah,
That's true.
I like the Porsche engine, but I also like rotaries too. So he probably had an engine that probably needed to get rebuilt, and he was a rotary guy, so he probably did that
Yeah,
swap. But that's his deal. He can
Sure.
do that if he wants to.
Sure.
I'm not into the thing about having a collector car unless I'm mega wealthy, which I'm not.
Yeah.
I can buy two of the same car one, I can keep as a collector, which I probably wouldn't do. But the second, I can go do whatever I want with it. Because that's the whole reason I got into cars is I can do what I want to the cars. I can customize the car. If I wanted to do a stock car, I wouldn't be on the show if I like stock cars.
Well, when it comes to the Volkswagen, somebody could undo that years from now. Somebody could just go back and go right back and make it the way they want to make it. And I mean, all this stuff is reversible.
And nothing's changed since the beginning of time. We, when we had, Orwin on the show last, I'm sure he did plenty of things to a vintage car because he raced vintage cars.
Oh yeah.
That people would be like, why would you do that to a 32 coupe or whatever, it's because that's what he wanted to do.
Why would they put a trailer hitch on a Ferrari?
Yeah, I was just
Lusso,
thinking
Exactly, because they wanted to tow a trailer. That's what they wanted. Everybody has the right to do.
But look at that. Look what that led to.
Well,
that was one of the clues that led them to believe that. That's
I have to think though that the trailer hitch is partially because it's a Wilson. It's kind of like Beach Boy.
I can do.
They can do whatever they want.
Exactly.
That car is provenance, right?
Yeah,
it's like doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Totally
but as
matter.
far as car customization goes, you do whatever you want to. It's your freaking car. You do whatever you want.
Well, I was reading about Janis Joplin's Porsche the other day. A little thing popped up on my feed, and I was like, I've seen that car. I know the paint job, but the history of that car, like you know the car, right? You know the paint job, the Janis Joplin Porsche 356.
Yeah,
like that's super interesting. And that car has now been restored. The mural was restored because someone was like, that car, man, that's a special car.
Yeah.
And that crazy, stoner LSD paint job done in Haight-Ashbury, wherever it was done, is like, that's worth doing. And the car's still valued at what, 1.5 million, 1.75 million.
And she paid a friend of a friend to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And she wanted a Mercedes.
I used to have a problem with people vandalizing their car, putting 10,000 stickers, which we just did our bumper sticker show, but now it's like, I don't care. It's your car. You do whatever you want.
Okay.
It's your form of expression. It's probably your only form of expression that you can get away with without getting into trouble, to be honest with you.
True.
You're getting old.
Am I?
Yeah, you're getting old.
Okay.
So you're mellowing out in your old age.
I'm mellowing out.
You're getting
You
mellow.
know what I want to build next, right? You think I'm mellowing out?
What do you want to build next?
I told you. I want to do the wagon build.
Oh, that's right.
Grandma's dragon wagon.
It's a transition to go from
easy with the transition.
That's a 510. It's a 510, right? For our guests, let's tell them what it is. It's a 510.
No, what I wanted. I had a Datsun 510 wagon, which it's the only car I regret selling. The only car, and the guy I sold to won't sell it back to me. He's a paint shop guy. So, but my goal was to drive basically a pro street import wagon, and I'm gonna do it again. I don't know if it'll be a 510 or an Mazda RX-3 wagon, but I'm gonna put a nasty rotary engine in it. It's gonna be on the ground. It'll have an old school paint job on it, and I'm gonna drive it on the street, but I'm taking it on the track and take it to wherever I go. But most people would be like, why would you do that if RX-3 wagon is really hard to find. 510s are getting harder to find, but that's not as rare as the RX-3. I do that too.
But you're going to do it anyway.
Put a 4-link, tub it, dump it on the ground. Yep. People are like, why would you cut up? I was like, that's because, don't sell it to me if you don't want me to do it. So I would say I
think you just lost a sale. Somebody out there listening going, I'm not selling it to that guy.
Well, hopefully that owner's not listening to this show right now but see, I'm gonna do it. It's like, if you're not gonna do it to your car, then let somebody else do it.
Yeah.
I hate when people get cars and they don't do anything with them, and no one knows that they exist. The chances of some kids seeing and being inspired to do something with when they get older or whatever, that's how I got inspired. That's how most of us got inspired. They saw somebody else do something. I'll want to do that too. Yeah. Right. So if you're going to have a car, take it out. Let it see some daylight, do something, drive it, something.
See, so you gave us permission.
Yeah. Well, you said RX-3 wagon, and I had a flashback. We had, my dad had one. I remember it.
No shit.
Yeah, I remember riding around in that thing, and when you said RX-3 wagon, I'm like, oh my gosh, we had one of those.
I love that thing. I love it. So I'm looking at one right now and trying to see if I can get one. But this build, I've done plenty of builds that I haven't finished, unfortunately. But this is the one that the wagon was like.
You can do it.
Yeah, I got to do it. It's like I said, I told Dan, it's going to be my swan song. I'm not dying, but this will be the build of all builds. If I don't build anything after that, I'll be okay with it. But. So long as I can do it, my wife lets me.
Well, now I know who can paint it.
Well, I was just saying, because most likely, because the one I'm looking at right now, it's got some rust in the wrong spots, unfortunately. But there's not a lot of pickings for that car, so you don't have a lot of choices. But
You
what's
can
cool,
still bring it back to life. It's all,
no,
it's all good.
in Australia they have a lot of repop or like people making those parts again because they're
really?
it's huge in Australia.
Really?
Oh my gosh,
RX3 wagons are big in Australia.
just RX3s period.
Really?
Because a lot of the wagon and coupe and stuff they transfer over. But like if you in Australia and New Zealand, it's massive.
Really?
Oh, that's what inspired me to do an RX3 wagon. Otherwise, I would just do a 510.
Didn't know.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty big out there. It ain't cheap, but at least it exists. The parts exist.
Yeah.
So you don't have to like fabricate new stuff.
So if a Mazda pulls up to your driveway,
I know what it is.
the next week, who's driving it.
No problem.
I'll send you the rendering because I usually do renderings of my cars before I build them. But I'll send you the rendering of what I want. It's like, can you do this for me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm only going to do work on friends' cars now. So now you're in the friend zone.
All right, let's go.
But,
Sorry, everybody else.
Yeah, everybody else is going to have to wait.
You gotta get a lot of friend requests on Instagram and Facebook now.
510s, by the way, were one of my my brother had a 510 and would slalom race them, back in the day, but he built this model, and I always liked the red, white, and blue ones, with the red, with the white on the side,
the
with blue
BRE
stripe.
livery.
Yeah, and I always liked that paint job on those cars. But 510, the 2-door 510 was one of my favorites. When they're lowered out and they got the they look cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I like those cars.
All right. Anything else for Mr. Beecher?
No, I'm just gonna need his phone number after this.
Yeah, I got a couple. We kind of glossed over. I kind of want to ask because I used to work in Santa Barbara. I managed the Circuit City up there back in the day, and so on. What's it like being a cop in a resort town, kind of small town like Santa Barbara? Like, was it kind of Mayberry RFD-ish, or was it like, oh damn, we got serious stuff? I mean, I know the fires are probably crazy for police.
Yeah. So I get that question a lot, and it's really interesting. Santa Barbara was its own beast. We were really busy.
Really?
And especially in the 90s. Crime was really high in the 90s.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, we were rocking and rolling all the time.
Really? I had no idea. And I was up there in the 90s.
Especially a couple blocks on State Street. Had a rep for,
Well, there was Haley Street had a couple of bars on it that were kind of a mess, and then Milpas had a couple of them, but downtown was just off the rails.
Really? So it kept you busy.
Yeah. So I think people would be really surprised. They think it's a sleepy little town, but there's an underbelly there that people don't even know that's there.
Gangs?
Yeah, they have gangs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of drug stuff. I mean, Mexican cartel stuff going on there.
It's been kind of quiet lately, though.
It has
I don't want to
been.
jinx it or anything. But
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is dialed down from the 90s and the 2000s. We had a couple of really big cases where we put a bunch of them in jail for a long time, and that kind of slowed things down for a little bit as far as the gang stuff goes.
Yeah.
Wow.
But there's with this many bars that we have in Santa Barbara, the alcohol issue, the underlying alcohol issue in the town was really something that people.
A lot of
didn't
DUIs,
understand.
crashes, fights, brawling, that kind of stuff.
And these were totally fun, but totally probably illegal now. But we used to have these big DUI checkpoints.
Oh,
and we, I don't know if you remember this or not, but we used to shut down City Lot 10. Right.
Oh no, I don't
you
remember
heard about this.
No,
oh
no.
man, these were so fun. All right, so so what we did is of course no announcement. Right.
Yep.
We would show up, and we had probably a crew of good 20 or 30 cops at least, and we had the tow trucks all lined up. We had a DUI trailer. We had a phlebotomist. I'm not saying that right.
Phlebotomist?
Yes.
Phlebotomist.
Yeah, that would draw blood for us.
Yeah.
And so we had the whole operation was all right there in the street, right?
Don't have to bring them into the station.
No. So what we did is that we set up the DUI checkpoint outside of lot 10, and we directed everybody that when you left the lot at the end of the night, you had to turn a certain way, and everybody had to go through the checkpoint. And we had 600 cars going through a checkpoint at night.
I don't remember that.
And we were towing 30 cars. We were arresting people left and right. It was a madhouse. It was crazy, but it was so much fun.
He said that repeated times. It must have been.
Can't do that anymore. But
what is it? Because a law changed?
The civil rights lawyers or something.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, they've determined, DUI checkpoints are questionable. They've changed the way that they use them now. They still have checkpoints, but they're just done way differently than they were back then.
Yeah.
And you could say that was entrapment at that point because you only gave them one way in. They had to go through the funnel of death. They could not veer outside of it. And then people would try to get out. Or we had people standing in the lines of cars because people be switching seats.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And so they point at a car and they go switching seats.
I'm sure.
And then we'd go over there and identify them. And sure enough, they're deuce. And we.
If you're a cop, that does sound fun. Actually, it's like
so all the friends that Eric made in the beginning of the show are now not his friends. The ones that drink.
Those were the good old days. But
if they drink and drive, no good. No bueno.
We don't condone that.
No bueno.
All right, Eric, great to have you on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have seen his work. He does great work.
Yeah. And for all you listening, don't look him up. Don't try to contact him. And not at least until I do.
Yeah, you do an internet search on me, might not like what you find.
Well, we should ask. Do you want to say how people can reach out to you? Do you want to do that, or it's up to you?
Yeah. Well, so the name of the business is called South Beach Rods, right? Which the pun is the South Beach. The beach is spelled Beech, which is part of my last name, right? And so it's southbeachrods.com is where you could find it. Once I turn it on. And then, I mean, I think people would be able to find me just fine if they really wanted to. But
and you're in Solvang, San Ynez?
So, I live in San Ynez now. Okay. We lived in Santa Barbara, Goleta for a long time. And we just recently, just a couple of years ago, moved up to San Ynez again because I was looking for a place to cut down my costs, my overhead, and be able to do my own thing and not get too stressed out about having too much going on. And so I'm really trying to control, what's going in and what's going out. So, but yeah, we love it up in San Ynez. It was a good move, way better than going to Arizona.
Yeah, we love San Ynez Valley.
That's a little cooler than Arizona.
Yeah. Right now, not by much. But, but
true.
It is. Right now, it's hot. But yeah, we love it up there, and it was a good move, and so we're very happy. But now I'm just trying to concentrate on. I'm every day. In fact, yesterday I was looking at my car and go, I really gotta get this car done. My own car. I've got a '68 C10 truck that I'm building.
Nice.
And then
cool.
I've got my '65 Bug and I've got other things that I would like to. Eventually, what I really like to do is just buy my own projects and redo them and sell them. And so I don't get too tied to them. There's cars that like my Volkswagen I've had since I was 19. I'm emotionally attached to.
Yeah, that's understandable.
It's going to be hard to get rid of that car at some point. At some point, I will. But there's a couple other projects I've seen out there. There's a 300 SL kit that I'm dying to do
300 SL. Wow.
But they're super expensive. I mean, just the body is $20,000 just for the body. Then you got to get a donor car, which you can use a Mercedes SLK or whatever for it. You take it all apart and you put this car on top of it. That's something I'd really like to do. And
a donor engine can't be cheap for that car either, right?
Well, I'd use a donor car. It'd be a Mercedes.
Oh, okay.
I'd want to put a Mercedes engine in it if it was
300. Sure.
Even though it's all going to be newer. So you can use a 2009 or newer SLK as your donor car, and you just take it apart and put the body on it. And there's a lot of, fabrication that would have to occur, but the kit is surprisingly fairly well detailed and complete as far as the doors and the windows and the emblems and all the stuff that would be hard to get or find or really expensive to buy.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is in the kit, but there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be done to the kit to make it right. I mean, there's a lot of crap, a lot of stuff you'd have to do to clean it up and make it look right. So, that's that would be my dream
That'd be a
someday.
fun project.
Yeah, and so maybe I'll find some investor and we'll go in on it and do it. But who knows? We'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah,
That's fun. Maybe next time you're on,
yeah.
you've made some progress on that front.
Yeah,
At
I'll
least
let
on
you
the
know.
bug, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because I keep seeing car shows coming up, and I'm like, I think maybe I can get done enough to get it to the show.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to take it to a show if it's not completely done. Because I believe that this car could be another magazine car if I finish it. And because it's unique in a way that there isn't a whole lot out there anymore, and people don't build those cars like they used to back in the day. Back in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that, you'd see these super show cars that were done, with billet aluminum and all this stuff, and you think, oh my gosh, that must have cost, $100,000 back then, would have been a lot of money, right? Now it's a $500,000 car,
Wow.
and I don't see with Volkswagens that way people doing that anymore.
Yeah.
They're not going to spend that kind of money on a Volkswagen, most
Yeah.
likely, right?
Yeah.
But I'd still like to get it out there and see what happens, and so that's one of my goals here in the next few months is to start picking away at it and get it done. Problem is it sits so long that I almost have to take it back apart again and redo stuff
Redo some stuff, yeah.
because it's been sitting so long.
Yeah.
But the majority of the main stuff, in fact, I had to paint the car, so I stopped modifying it. Because I got to the point where I kept thinking, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to change this, change that. And I started doing it. And I changed so much stuff that one thing leads to another. And you got to the point where you're like, if I paint the car, I won't make any more changes to it, So that's what I did. I painted it so that I would stop modifying it, It
Force
worked.
yourself.
It worked.
Wow. Can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
All right. Eric Beecher, thank you for joining us on West of Tulsa.
Thank you.
All right. So follow, subscribe. We have our YouTube
Channel.
Thank you. And go to westoftulsa.com, go to the tip line page, click on that, fill it out. We'd love to have you on the show. All right.
Or at least tell us your story
At
so we
least
can
tell us
tell
your
it
story.
on the show.
That's right.
Yep. Always looking for good stories.
Yep. All right. And we appreciate you listening and watching on whatever you're listening and watching on. And we will see you west of Tulsa.